All right, so here we are again for part 6, I believe, of the second part of part 2 of Does God Exist? Today we're going to start out with politics and see where it goes from there, because your worldview foundation ends up affecting every area of life, and we did allude in our last episode to the fact that politics has essentially replaced religion. Mm-hmm. So this is Eric Slawick, aka the UWM Penn Guy.
This is Alex Burks.
And let's do Penn Guy podcasting. So we left off last time with kind of the practical day-to-day level of the historical loop of early Christians, modern Christians, and how secularized cultures respond to them. So I wanted to move back a couple of steps and then come back to apologetics, or the defense of the faith, again, by pointing out that, giving a kind of a basic definition of political extremism. In the 20th century, you had two basic political extremist philosophies. You had fascism and communism. And fascism was the right-wing philosophy, with the idea of the nation essentially being the ultimate good and the ultimate force in the world. And the nation was almost always, it could be oligarchical, but more often than not, the nation was embodied in the leader. And the will of the leader was the force that drove history. It was the ultimate manifestation of sort of the great men idea of history. It was somewhat organic, but it allowed for a cohesion and unity of command that allowed these fascist states like Italy under Mussolini, and then of course the quintessential example being Adolf Hitler. And they all had, the Nazis were the most extreme about this, the Volkish people idea, where the individual was nothing and the state was everything. That was one of Hitler's most infamous quotes. So that was fascism. That was right-wing extremism. Now, on left-wing extremism, you had communism, where instead of the nation, and this can get to be a really fuzzy distinction, but instead of the nation, you had the people as a class entity. And the greater good was revolution and the march towards utopia, where the identity of each group in the population determined whether you were a good guy or a bad guy, much like in Nazi Germany. Your racial or ethnic identity determined it. Here it was your class identity. And communism also failed ultimately because it tended to become self-perpetuating, where the revolution never really ends until it basically consumes everything. And also because communism can become surprisingly authoritarian very quickly.
Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to add to that, to those definitions?
I think that maybe the major philosophical stumbling block that undergirds all these political movements of the 20th century is kind of an innate knowledge of original sin that's kind of implicit in almost every political philosophy, right? So people know that something's wrong, society is not functioning like it should be, human dignity is being undermined. There are greater ideals that we want to pursue, but we can't, despite our best efforts, right? So that's the entire thing. But I think when you take particular facets of the human person and you amplify them beyond the whole, right? So you have the whole human person, and if you make that human person's political status or that human person's racial status greater than the whole of that individual person, you have a disproportionate anthropology, and therefore I'd say it's kind of impossible to really make any good out of that. And so I see that as the number one issue that kind of plagues a lot of these issues, as well as other philosophical issues that aren't really super like sexy to talk about. And I feel like most people don't understand them. But when you do start to understand the philosophies that went into a lot of these major revolutions, it starts to make a lot of sense.